and more people are joining, so I'm kind of diddle-dallying a little bit until we get most of you. So good to hear from everyone. Oh, first time, Baby. Welcome. Thank you. Ellen, it's always good to see you. Sandy, we have some members who are part of our planning committee joining us. That's wonderful. Here's to good health with water. All right. I think we should get started. Let me just.
Can I say something?
You can actually type in the message.
Where?
About, yes, please, if you don't mind. If you can't type in the message, I will give you the floor later. We will.
Okay, it's better that way. I prefer to take the floor after because I'm using my iPad. I cannot type.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for your patience.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I will just get started, and we're up to 171. We had over 500 people register in even such a short notice. So I'm really grateful for everyone who wants to learn about NGO CSW. I will leave our history and our purpose for this meeting to Ivy to introduce later. My job as chair of NGO CSW is to give you a little update on what we call the business of NGO CSW. And we were kidding around about how that is so serious. I mean, we do a lot of serious business. We organize the forum along with Commission on the Status of Women every year. We had to cancel for the first time because of COVID in early March. It was obviously very heartbreaking. We were breaking records this year with participation and even program. We had over 550 panel discussions scheduled. We were going to have consultation day at Apollo Theater that we already had sold over 700-800 tickets for. We had a reception, we had a rally, everything got canceled. But I'm more inspired and energized to keep our voices alive through this technology. In some ways, I feel very, very happy that we have this opportunity to gather even more people together. So when we used to have our monthly meetings, it was in New York. In the last couple of years, we had started including Facebook Live so more people could see and hear and interact with us. And this Zoom right now is even more wide reach. So we're really, really excited about that. Just a couple of brief updates. So we are still on course with our commitment to Generation Equality Forum. That is our big project that we're doing while we keep our business going until the next CSW. So even though I just mentioned that we did cancel CSW 64, and the member states had a one-day event, which the information actually is on our website. NGOCSW.org is being updated as we speak every day, because there's so much information. So please keep visiting our website and learning.
Houry, you're like breaking up. I don't know if it's just me, but.
Oh, am I breaking up? I seem to have pretty good connection here. I'm so sorry. Okay. Thanks. Maybe I'll just talk slower. But yes, so while we wait to see how we are organizing for CSW 65, which we will, either in person or online, we will somehow gather and support CSW, as you all know. UN business is ongoing. HLPF will meet. There will be UN business happening throughout the year. So we will be ready and prepared to jump on board on the civil society side when it is decided what, you know, how we're moving forward with CSW 65. In the meantime, as I said, we are committed and supporting Generation Equality Forum. As you know, we are the global convener. I'm part of the advisory group of 21. You will hear from the couple of members of that group of 21 who's also in our regions, activists, strong activists in our regions. And we're also gathering every 2 weeks with the advisory working group, which is the larger civil society supporting the work of the advisory group in bringing information and taking information back to their regions. If you're interested, all that information is also on our website, and you can send your interest to beijing25@ngocsw.org. Let's see. And another group that we're so proud of and support is what's called the Feminist Women's Movement Action Plan. It's FWMAP, and that's also has evolved into starting a new project that's called the University Teach-ins. I'm very, very excited and supportive of that. If you need more information on that, you can also email beijing25@ngocsw.org. And also join us every 2 weeks with the advisory working group, where you get more information on that. Let's see. We finished all our refunds from the CSW 64. It took us a while because there was just a lot of money to be refunded. It hurt to refund the money because that was going to be our money, going forward to support ourselves. But we are very lucky and happy to have amazing members and amazing executive committee that has kept our committee alive financially. So we will be fine. And I'm so grateful for everyone who's introducing themselves right here. I am going to stop my updates right now. I will take questions. I'm going to be watching the chat. So if anything I said sounded like something, you can either private message me on the side or ask your question openly so that everybody can see it as well and I can answer. And I am going to proudly hand over the floor to my Vice Chair, Ivy, who's going to give you a little bit of a history and background on NGO CSW in the regions and us. And then I will proudly listen in to our regions presenting their work. Thank you all so much for joining us again. I'll come back again at the end of the meeting and I will definitely answer your questions in the chat room. Ivy, the floor is yours. And first of all, before I do that, I want to thank Devin, who's supporting this whole technical aspect of this. And she's our amazing office manager, gender program coordinator. Hooray for Devin. Thank you all. See you at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Houry, so much. And as Houry said, I am the vice chair of NGO CSW in New York. My organization, I represent the Soka Gakkai International. And today I wanted to give a very brief introduction before we break out, because this is quite historic for us. It's the first time that we're gathering like all of the leadership of NGO CSWs globally. And so I hope that attracted you to this meeting today. I think that given our unusual circumstances, we're able to make this possible, for us to make this possible. I was realizing the other day, like, usually everyone would be traveling every which way, and it would be hard to actually get everyone, echo, in one place. So NGO CSW, first, it all started, so it was New York, Geneva, and Vienna who were, became Congo, or the Conference of NGOs Committees. And it was in 1972 that New York was established, and Geneva followed just a year after in 73, and then Vienna was in 1982. And then more recently, in 2016, the NGO CSWs were established in the regions of Asia Pacific, Latin America, Caribbean, Africa, MENA, and Arab states. And they're all part of, under the Congo Conference of NGOs. And just to give a little background also, NGO CSW, Geneva, Vienna, New York had been always very active in the NGO space within the UN, and throughout the world conferences of Mexico City, Copenhagen, Nairobi, and Beijing, they were participating in helping plan the NGO forums under the Congo umbrella. So I just wanted to also, historically share the work that had been going on. And so the regions, why were they established? And I want to point to also, if you weren't familiar already, but there's an app, an advocacy project globally that was initiated about 5 years ago. This was to commemorate Beijing 20. And in that app, which is called the NGOs and Human Rights Activists at the UN and CSW, which I really encourage you to download if you don't have already. Within that explains briefly also about this establishment of the regions. And the NGO CSWs, they offer an important resource for a global collaborative effort across regions, unified, yet responsive to regional diversity. So they work regionally as well as globally. And I wanted to end there because I don't need to say more. I want them to have as ample time to speak. And I'm going to hand it over to the two moderators. And it's Cecilia and Diana. And Cecilia is joining us from Mexico City. Cecilia Garcia Ruiz is her full name. And she's currently the Regional EM 2030 Coordinator for Latin America and Caribbean. And she's the Project Coordinator for CLADEM, which is the Latin America and Caribbean Community for the Defense of Women's Rights. And Diana Abu Abab, sorry, I'm saying it wrong, is calling in from Beirut, Lebanon, and she's the Executive Director of MARSA, which is the Sexual Health Center. So I warmly welcome them and everyone else who's speaking on the panel. Thank you so much, everyone, for, yes, Houry wants to say something.
Ivy, I am so sorry. I really made a mistake in my intro and didn't give the floor to our young professionals because we did this amazing youth speak out. I apologize. I just was getting so excited looking at all these faces. Diana, if you don't mind, I want to give the floor to Saida for 2 minutes because this was something we were so proud of. Go ahead.
And we will do the poll after Saida.
Yes.
Good. Okay, thank you.
We'll get this right eventually.
Okay,
Thank you for everyone to be flexible with us. I do want to hand the floor over to Saida, and you will learn so much about the young professionals in 2 minutes. And I see some questions about the app, about the history. Devin will put the links in as she has time. And then we will have minutes, recordings, all of the information that you see coming out today will be packaged and sent out to everyone who registered, and then on our website as well. So if you miss anything, it will all come back to you. And thank you for your patience, Saida. You have the floor. And then we'll go right into the moderators after the poll. Thank you.
Thank you, Houry. Hello, everyone. My name is Saida Rizvi, and alongside my co-chair, Samira, we lead NGO CSW New York's Young Professional Forum. It's wonderful to be here and connect with everyone today. And we just wanted to provide you with a quick update about how the Young Professionals Forum has been convening virtually and what our plans are moving forward. So in light of the current global situation, like everyone else, we transitioned a lot of our work to a virtual platform through our Youth Seek Out event, which took place a few weeks ago on 30th April. The event was framed as a reading of the current state of the world and how it impacts youth, gender advocacy, and the Gender Equality Forum marking Beijing 25. This event was hosted with support from our wonderful regional partners, including Marsa Sexual Health Center in Lebanon, the Canadian Council of Young Feminists, Young Feminists Europe, and many more. We had close to 300 participants in the event from all around the world, and we were able to host a really dynamic and engaging discussion with opportunities for all our participants to speak, share resources, and network together. And we received a lot of positive feedback from that initial event, and from the results of a post-call survey, we have decided to move forward with the Youth Speak Out event as being part of a continued series that we hope to host every other month. So there was a lot of interest from that initial call to continue holding these global calls with opportunities for breakout groups that are specific to different regions and languages. So in the coming weeks, we will continue to work with our partners to see how best we can continue the series on a global level, but with also a really intentional regional lens. And our next call is most likely going to be in early to mid-June, and we should be sharing a save the date by next week. So please be on the lookout for those. And if you have any thoughts or want to take a more active role in collaborating with us, please feel to reach out to me at saida.rizvi@gmail.com or to reach out to the NGO CSW office if that's easier. And as a whole, we're really hoping to continue these incredibly meaningful and timely discussions. And we hope you will continue to join us as we convene together from around the world. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Saida. So we wanted to engage all of you before we have more presentations. So this involves your participation. Please get ready. We're going to do a poll. It's going to be a simple poll. Devin, are we ready? Yes, you should see in front of you. It says, where are you joining from? So it lists 6 different options. And then once it seems like most people have responded, I'm gonna have Devin give us the results. Great. So we have 46% joining us from North America, and followed by Europe at 26%. Asia Pacific is represented 13%. Latin America and Africa at 6%, and Arab MENA at 5%. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in that. And again, we're going to share all the notes and links and everything that you see in the chat box also later. So Cecilia and Diana, please take it away. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Ivy, for your introductions, and Houry and Saida. As Ivy mentioned, I am the Executive Director of Marsa Sexual Health Center in Beirut. We are a center that advocates for the equitable access to sexual and reproductive health rights in Lebanon and the region. And we are also a service provider for women, girls, vulnerable populations. I will leave it now to Cecilia to introduce herself briefly.
Thank you, Diana, and thank you very much to the organizers of this meeting for inviting us to co-moderate the discussion. I just want to add something very quickly about Equal Measures 2030. For the ones that do not know what Equal Measures is, we are a joint effort of leading regional and global organizations from the civil society and the development and the private sectors, working to strengthen the capacity of girls and women's rights organizations to do data-driven advocacy to achieve the sustainable development goals and advance gender equality. So that's who we are, and we are very excited to be here with you and listen from you and our speakers today. We will start right away with the presentations. In the interest of time, we won't be reading the whole bios of our speakers today, but Devon has shared the program in the chat box, and there you will be able to read a little bit more about our speakers today, who represent the different regions. And also, please, we will have a Q&A session after the presentations. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, or wait and raise your hand at the end of the presentations, and we will give the floor to the people that want to participate or that have asked their questions in the chat box, just to try to run the discussion a bit smooth. So those are the announcements before we start. So I want to introduce first Carole Shaw from Australia and Bandana Rana from Nepal, representing the Asia Pacific region. They are co-chairs of the NGO CSW Asia Pacific. So the floor is yours, Carole and Bandana, for the next 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is Carole. Bandana and I prepared this collectively, and I will read it out, and Bandana is available also to add in or to address any questions either now or later. But before I start, I would like to acknowledge the meeting space we're meeting in, the traditional elders, the Indigenous elders, and the community elders that we have. This is something we do every time we meet here in Australia, and it's a very important part of acknowledging not only those in the room, but those who are not in the room, who we are discussing. We were asked 3 questions for this, and so I'm going to go pretty quickly. I hope you can all hear. We were asked 3 key questions to present. How do we engage in the region? So at this time, all of us are busy working both regionally and nationally on multiple things. I am currently working with the Asia Pacific Women's Watch, which is a large voluntary activism network based in Asia and the Pacific region. We work on women's rights, advancement of women. We were established pre-Beijing and has special consultative status with ECOSOC. We, the co-chair, Bandana, I'm going to go quickly through this part, is also one of the co-founders of Asia Pacific Women's Watch. She is currently the vice chair of the CEDAW committee. At the national level, she's a founder of the National Network for Beijing Review, a consortium of NGOs working on the Beijing Platform for Action, has convened a national youth conference on generation equality with 200 youth participants in January, and is now actively planning on strengthening youth movement building in the region through various dialogues and communication. So at a personal level and at different organizations that we work with, we're all busy working across and between, and it's good to see some of the people I know, especially Carolyn and Najiba, who's on the call today, which was good to see you there. We have been working mainly with COVID. Everybody, I think, had the rug pulled out from their feet in March, and a lot of our members are working nationally, provincially, on these shifting sands of policy, action, sudden martial law that's coming in, increased surveillance, lockdown. So I think it's a very common place in a lot of our countries at the moment. And in a quick poll through the organization and in the work that Asia Pacific Women's Watch is doing, we found some really key areas that have been impacting because of COVID. And it's been very disappointing that UN Women are not leading on the gender impacts of COVID-19, that this is something we're really observing in the region. We're seeing an overall unprecedented rise in authoritarianism, shrinking spaces to be able to interact with government, lack of government accountability and transparency. The impact on human rights through the increased surveillance, the freedom of movement, and there's a need to really explore some of this as we move forward on the agenda. The freedom of the press has been severely impacted. Stringent controls of not only the national press, but social media platforms, and arrests of those who are speaking out in these platforms against government actions or are even starting to become critical. There's an increased monitoring of community service organizations and NGOs. The structures of democracy are really slowly starting to be dismantled and threatened by some of these actions, which are being justified as emergency situations. And as in most of our countries, there are groups being set up, monitoring and evaluation groups, and none of those have got women in them, or very few of them have got women in them. The gender responsiveness in policy and actions is very poor. Migrant workers in the region are greatly impacted. We have many stuck at closed borders, some traveling home. We're hearing from India where there's been sudden shutdowns in public transport where people are having to walk for 10, 15 days to get back to their villages. These have got massive impacts not only on the health and well-being of populations, but you can imagine the dangers of the communities as they're moving. Seasonal workers are finding themselves stranded in countries where they can't get home. There are visa, finance challenges, and some are facing very dangerous border crossings. They're trying to get across illegally and are finding themselves in a challenging situation. Increased on this, and I have to add this, we have the hurricane season at the moment. So Bangladesh and Fiji are also severely impacted by hurricanes. So the issue of the humanitarian situation, Australia itself has just come out of the bushfires. It's really impacting severely in this region. Domestic violence, of course, is on the rise. And there's massive increases in the unpaid work sector. I think the economic impact of this, the fallout of this is going to be huge. The gender statistics are not coming in. I'd be very interested to hear from you all later and to see what you're actually getting in your own countries around gendered statistics. Some of the good areas are that because men are spending more time with women at home, there is a little bit of a shift in that gender situation at home, and some men are seeming to be a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for, thoughtful about the impact of how a woman works in the home with the family and the children, because for many of them it's the first time they've actually had to be in that situation 24/7. The good thing is as well, there's some virtual networks that are starting to arise. So people are mobilizing, and they're mobilizing in different ways. Regionally, there's a lot of work happening. Asia Pacific Women's Watch is working across organizations to draw together a regional report, which will use the BPFA as a framework of analysis and serve to engage more women in the region in the conversations and be used to influence future NGO engagement strategies. In the Pacific, CSOs and NGOs in Fiji have monitored the COVID-19 pandemic, and they're working across different sectors across the Pacific to contribute to relief efforts where possible, provide humanitarian support. So with these additional crises of the cyclone, it's been really hard to mobilize and really urgent to mobilize. Carole, the Asia Pacific Resource and Research Centre for Women, has been holding regular webinars and is working collaboratively with its members to develop and present research and statements on the impact of COVID-19 from a sexual, reproductive and health rights perspective. They've also been working on organising a joint a youth survey ahead of the to be pulling together some of that information. APWLD is working really hard on across these issues. I've lost half of it. Oh, here, Sangat and South Asian Feminist Network has been organising panels series to explore the impact of COVID and organising around South Asia. SAATHI, South Asian Reproductive Justice and Accountability Initiative, is also very active. So there's real actions on the ground, not only by the national networks, but also the regional networks to try to inform. And the CEDAW committee has issued a guidance note on CEDAW under COVID, which is calling upon member states to put women and girls at the centre of the COVID response programmes and policies. The drafting of this was led by the co-chair, Bandana Rana. So any questions on that would go to her. With regards to the Generation Equality Campaign, as you said, global...
It's Diana. You've been speaking for 9 minutes, so if Bandana is going to speak, it's time to pass the mic to her, please.
Bandana agreed that I would present this and then she would be there for questions because I may not be able to stay.
Okay, I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I did not make that clear at the beginning. With the Generation Equality, we haven't done as much as we could. I'm very interested to hear from groups in the region who are working on the Generation Equality. We're hoping that we actually see the postponement as a real benefit and an opportunity, as a time to be able to gather, mobilize, and to bring everyone in. And we're hoping in the next 6 to 12 months to really progress this a lot further and have some of the national convenings that have been organized, Nepal, Philippines, Fiji, and to build on some of the young feminist networks to actually draw this into the Generation Equality in the CSW spaces. So we don't know what's out there and who wants to be part of it. And if anyone would wish to be part of these discussions, please contact us by the Facebook or by the website, and we'll be very, very happy to speak with you. Is that it? Is that my time, Diana?
You can have 2 more minutes if you need it.
No, I'm done. That was it. I got it all out. Thank you.
There was one question that came up for Carole. I don't know when we.
Yes.
Maybe I would do questions at the end, or.
Yeah, I mean, this was very specific to Carole, but if you have to leave, maybe we can ask that particular question now, and then the other ones that came in the chat, we can wait for the Q&A session. But this particular question addressed to you, Carole, is from Winifred. Why do you think that you and women are not to the fore in the COVID-19? Like, I guess in the forefront. You mentioned something about you and women.
I honestly can't answer that. I don't know. Regionally, I think everybody's had to suddenly stop and reassess. Resources are tight. The reformatting, maybe Bandana has a deeper insight into that. I have no idea why it's not happening. And this is just what we have viewed in this region. So I'm sorry, I can't give an answer to that. Bandana, do you have an answer for that one?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah. All right. I personally think in the context of Nepal and some of the countries in South Asia, UN Women is active in terms of mobilizing women's groups, organizing webinars, in terms of COVID response programs, as well as women, peace and security, in which myself, I personally participated as a panelist also on women, peace and security as well. So I think they are doing webinars, and I know in Nepal they helped a group of women's organizations to draft a memorandum for the government on urgent issues in regard to COVID response programs. But overall, in terms of, let's say, for example, shelters, and now operating shelters is a critical issue and a challenge now, because there are already residents living in the shelters, and there are new residents coming in as domestic violence survivors. So there is no protocol guidelines as such to run, operate shelters. So I think probably UN Women it's not that UN Women is not doing, but UN Women could have been more in the forefront as the leading women's agency within the UN. I think that is what we meant by that, you know, but it is doing it in bits and pieces, but not as the front runner of gender impact and gender issues on COVID-19.
Thanks, Bandana.
Thank you, Bandana, for your answer. Right now, we are going to move to our next region, which is the Arab states and MENA. The presentation will be by Lina Abu Habib from Lebanon, and she is from the Collective for Research and Training for Development Action. The floor is yours, Lina, for 10 minutes.
Thank you, Diana. I just have to say that I co-chair the Arab caucus together with my friend Diana and with our colleague from Morocco, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today because of sickness. Hopefully not COVID. It's Samira Bikarden from the Association Démocratique des Femmes du Maroc. I'll just try to be very, very brief, because actually Carole's presentation in terms of the challenges very much echoes a lot of the impact and implication of the crisis in the MENA region. So let me just focus on a number of areas which are at the same time critical and important, and these are areas of oversight. You know, they fall into this black hole. Let's remember in terms of context first that the situation is coming on within a context of regimes that are oppressives, either oppressives or failed states or a combination of both. This means that already there are stark inequalities, gender inequalities, social demographics, etc. And plus you have to add to it a police state. Even in the situation of Lebanon, which the urban myth that was common before the last year was that it is a more open country in the region is actually quickly turning into a police state, and the pandemic has helped this very much. Again, let me take the example of Lebanon. It has pushed people from after the beautiful revolution of October 17th and the reclaiming of the public spaces by the people, by citizens, and reclaiming these public spaces by feminists, by the queer community, by young people, by people who had an inclusive vision and an egalitarian vision of our society. All of us have been pushed back to the private sphere, and basically the state what the state is now doing is again practicing all forms of oppressions against activists, against people in the media, against anybody basically who has a different discourse, and these are many. Falling through the cracks of in terms of responses are, of course, I will echo what our colleague Carole has said, is the issue of migrant workers, sex workers, refugees. Remember, there's first of all, generations of refugees in the region, with the last but not least, the almost circa 3 million Syrian refugees, mostly in Jordan and in Lebanon, but also a little bit in other countries of the region. Carole has talked about people being stranded, not able to return home. in the MENA region, because of discriminatory laws, for instance, because of the discriminatory nationality laws, families of women who are non-nationals are unable to return home because the country will not repatriate them, does not consider them nationals. In the case of Lebanon, the country has refused repatriation of Palestinian refugees who accidentally are not only permanent residents of Lebanon, but have no other country to return to than Lebanon. So this is actually a very good example of how discriminatory laws that have existed and for which we have been, and laws that we have been struggling against, have actually manifested themselves in a situation of the pandemic. So how are we dealing with these challenges? I think one of the things that have been, I think, particular in this region is despite the oppression, despite logistical problems, despite problems of connectivity, despite issues related to infrastructures that are broken and that have been broken before the pandemic, despite all of these, at least at the level of feminist groups in the region, there has been kind of I don't want to call it immediate or overnight, but a very rapid move into virtual mobilization. I want to mention here a process that is taking place, which is co-convened by my colleague Fatma Khafagi from Egypt and myself, where we have started to convene bi-weekly meetings of women's organizations, and we're hoping that this outreach will be broader in order to basically pool our thinking in terms of the impact of COVID, in terms of what each one of us is doing, what can we learn from each other, and what kind of context could we be looking towards in a post-COVID situation. And let's remember, it's very obvious what is happening now in this region is a clear indication that the post-COVID period is going to be that of increased oppression, much lesser space for civic movement, and basically maybe we should forget about democracy altogether. Nevertheless, I would concur with what my colleague has said before me. This has been a period of intense regrouping, reforming. It's still not sufficient because simply because we need to broaden our outreach. Diana, how much time do I still have? How much time do I still have?
You have 4 minutes. You can have 6 as well if you need to. Okay, so feel free.
Perfect. So basically, so the idea now, and I think I want to use this the remaining time that I have to invite us actually to see how you can join at least 2 processes that are taking place in the region. One is the process that I told you about, and for which you can write to me or to my colleague Fatma Khafagi, because we would like to reach out to more of you. We would like to have a bigger engagement in the region. I mean, amongst the group, I think we have 5% only from the MENA region. We really need to make sure that each one of us amplifies the outreach. So how do you engage with us? By simply just calling us. In terms of the Arab Caucus and in terms of NGO CSW Arab states, with my colleague Diana and our colleague Samira, we're hoping to revamp the Arab Caucus website and see how to make it into a tool that would be a communication tool and outreach tool for all of us. And usually at this time of the year, in a quote-unquote normal year, we would have been working for the preparation of a regional convening to do a training for the not so usual suspect to attend the CSW. As Houry has said, this has changed dramatically over the past few months. What we are doing is rethinking our regional convening. The purpose of it would have been to make sure that more and more feminist organizations, young people organizations, organizations of migrant workers, organizations of sex workers, LGBTQ organizations, actually are able to get as much information as possible to engage and hopefully influence the upcoming CSW. So that is going to be our challenge for the next few months. I think the changes in plan is, I agree, is certainly an opportunity for us to basically to change the way we have been approaching this. And to finish, I just want to add another a final point. I think it will be clear once we hear the rest of the presentations that the challenges that this unusual time, these unusual circumstances have put on us in terms of women's rights organizations, feminist organizations, are very much similar. So now is the time to think about sustainability and the word that I don't like much, which is resilience. And that is the reason why we're trying to face this with more engagement, at least at the regional level. But I think the NGO CSW for us is another level of bringing all our knowledge, intelligence, and creativity together to see how we will overcome. I don't think overcome, but let's say navigate this period. And then finally, the last bit is around the gender equality forum. There's a lot to be said here, but and I think we've had this discussion before with within the smaller group and with Houry. This is certainly an excellent opportunity to rethink our engagement and make it stronger with the Gender Equality Forum. The space is there, whether it's with the NGO CSW Arab states, which our engagement, our commitment, and also our challenge is to make sure that it's open, that you can access it, that you can talk to the three of us and think together how we can transform that engagement. And secondly, through the regional CSOs convening, which is thinking specifically about how to navigate that COVID period and what are the specific challenges that we're dealing with, and how we're dealing with these challenges. If there's any additional idea, or thoughts or insights, and since Samira could not be with us, I don't know if Diana, you want to add something, but particularly let me just critique ourselves by saying we may not have been as good as the other region in terms of proper serious representation, especially of the youth groups, especially of non-binary groups, especially of groups, migrant women's groups. And that is a serious challenge. How do we overcome this? How do we make sure everybody is in there, everybody has a voice? I think that is what this additional time is. That's the opportunity that this additional time is giving us. Diana, would you like to add something, please?
Thank you, Lina, for raising this point. As you mentioned, we have been discussing this issue recently. I like to say that I like to turn challenges into opportunities. And like you mentioned, we will use this time to engage more individuals who are non-conforming and who are coming from regions that are usually less represented in these fora. So I suggest perhaps we think about this question, all of us. How can we include more people, and how can we use this time? And we can also share our ideas at the end during the Q&A.
Wonderful. With this, I think I'm done, but we'll definitely get back to you with the information on how to connect with us. Thank you. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you very much, Lina, and thank you very much, Diana, for adding to Lina's presentation. We are moving on to our next speakers. I want to introduce Stacy Lara, the president of the NGO CSW Geneva. and Laurie Richardson, Chair of the NGO CSW Vienna. Stacy and Laurie, the floor is yours for the next 10 to 12 minutes.
Okay, Laurie, did you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
Please go ahead, Stacy.
Okay, you know, I had prepared a little bit of a different presentation in that Geneva has not been as active with these regions until recently. So I thought it might be interesting, since we're all sharing, like Lina said, some of the similar COVID challenges, to take this opportunity to better explain what goes on in Geneva and what we do in Geneva, so that we can start to think about the post-COVID collaboration, and if we need to bring some of that to Geneva, that our committee is here to help. So these are some ideas about what we do as a committee, and also what does Geneva offer the United Nations and its system. So the CSW committee in Geneva is structured based on member organizations that are either in special consultative status or general consultative status with ECOSOC. We have a provision where we will admit associate members, but we have not explored that fully in the past, but we intend to as one of our post-COVID ideas, because our associate members would not have any voting rights, and that's just wouldn't really be sustainable. So the current membership structure is being discussed, and I think will be addressed this year. So another thing is, why is Geneva so important? Many things happen in Geneva, and many good opportunities have come from Geneva. As example, Geneva is the birthplace of the International Gender Champions, originally called just Geneva Gender Champions. This is a leadership network that brings together female and male decision makers determined in their work to break down gender barriers and to make gender equality a working reality in their spheres of influence. The whole idea was initiated and co-founded by the former UN Geneva Director General Michael Moeller, former US Ambassador to the UN in Geneva, Pamela Hamamoto, and a group you all might be familiar with, Women at the Table, co-founded by Caitlin Kraft Buckman. So it's a very wide-reaching network now with more than 250 active champions who are not just located in Geneva, but we have the offices in New York, Vienna, Geneva, Nairobi, The Hague, and Paris now. So another interesting takeaway about Geneva is that in 2008, CEDAW was permanently relocated to Geneva. The move of CEDAW to Geneva represented a significant step toward consolidating the UN Human Rights Treaty Body system. So now all of the UN treaty bodies are fully serviced by the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights here in Geneva. And until that move took place, CEDAW was the only human rights treaty body that was not in Geneva. So that allows us as a committee to be present with CEDAW and to work with CEDAW in a really a formal and informal way too. So in the post-COVID-19 world that we're all talking about, this particular CEDAW being in Geneva is of particular relevance, as we are all on this call moving toward a more integrated support or integrated approach to the UN and the treaty bodies, and how to use their works in our work. And And another thing is the Human Rights Council that is held 3 times per year here in Geneva in March, June, and September. And the Human Rights Council is one of our main gathering points of advocacy for the NGO committee in Geneva and for world human rights workers as well. It's a tremendous opportunity that we have here in Geneva to support global advocacy and to advance the status of women and girls and to protect their rights through the Human Rights Council. And one of the COVID challenges is there should be a Human Rights Council starting in June. We should already be inscribing our written statements, signing up for our oral statements. And I have been able to find no information on how to participate in this upcoming June session. There have been a few virtual calls with the High Commissioner for Human Rights, but it hasn't really gone beyond that here. So that's one of our challenges, in that the Human Rights Council is working itself out for a post-COVID world as well. And Geneva is also, interesting, the birthplace and the home of the Universal Periodic Review, the UPR. And the UPR is a voluntary process which involves a review of the human rights records of all of the UN member states. It's a multi-year process, and the review takes place under the auspices of the Human Rights Council. Each state is offered the opportunity to declare what actions they've taken toward improving their human rights and in their countries and toward fulfilling their human rights obligations. So the next sessions of UPR will be quite interesting, as states that are in the process now will be able to report their post-COVID strategies. Civil society can participate in the UPR. It's usually more or less welcome in the form of oral statements, even panel participation held jointly with governments. And NGOs can input national reports showcasing their field expertise, so that can be included in helping the member states to do better in their human rights work. And of course, the UNECE, being one of the 5 regional commissions of the UN, it is headquartered here in Geneva. And since the First World Conference on Women in Beijing in 1995, the UNECE Regional Review of the progress towards the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action has been held every 5 years in Geneva. And alongside this UNECE Regional Review is a civil society forum, which has historically been planned and executed by the NGO CSW Geneva. And I think before I was involved perhaps with, in collaboration with other NGO CSWs, but that was a little bit before my time. In 2014, the NGO CSW Geneva held the Beijing Plus 20 Civil Society Forum that attracted about 800 and some odd participants from around the world. And the key to the success of this civil society forum was this generous amount of funding that was garnered from the Swiss Development Corporation and the Canton of Geneva, which is another point I wanted to mention, is that being so close to these development corporations in Switzerland gives us the opportunity to develop relationships with them so that we can apply for funding that others might not know about. And we're also local, which helps our case quite a bit.
Sorry to interrupt you, Stacy. It's been 9 minutes already, so if Laurie also wants to talk, I'll suggest that we also move on to Laurie. I'm so sorry to interrupt you, Stacy.
No, I'm sorry, thanks.
Thank you. Laurie?
Stacy, did you have other points you needed to make, or?
Oh, I have lots to say about CSW in Geneva, so please take the floor, and I'm happy to share another time. Yeah, sorry about that. I just get going.
It's okay. Thank you for sharing, Stacy. Laurie.
Okay, thank you. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I'm Laurie Richardson, as I've been introduced, the chair of the NGO CSW here in Vienna. And I represent the women's organization, the global network. The name is FAWCO. And I know that there are quite a few of my FAWCO sisters here on this, in this virtual meeting, including some of our UN representatives who are active in New York and Geneva. And we work quite closely together with the NGO CSWs in New York and Geneva, and are hoping, as we do have member organizations in Nairobi, Manila, Perth, that we're Seoul, we're hoping to be able to connect to our sister NGO CSW organization in Asia Pacific, in Latin America, in the Arab states, with our other the NGO CSWs in the regions with our memberships. I know there are also quite a few members of NGO CSW Vienna who are here in the meeting. Our committee has about 25 member NGOs. We all have ECOSOC consultative status, and we're all representatives of NGOs. We had monthly meetings. In the pre-COVID era, we would meet in person at the UN in Vienna to plan events, to coordinate our advocacy work, develop statements, exchange information. What UN agencies based in Vienna that we mostly interact with are the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, the UN ODC, and the UN Industrial Development Organization. The UN ODC is the Secretariat for the Commission on Crime Prevention and Criminal Justice, the convention, three different conventions, the Convention on Transnational Organized Crime, and the Commission on Narcotic Drugs. And where we do advocacy work in the conferences that they hold in Vienna is on the gender issues connected to human trafficking, cybercrime, gender medicine, gender and addiction, education, peace building, and sustainable development. So you see that we have Vienna is smaller, much smaller than New York and Geneva, but we have quite a lot of interesting issues that are being worked on here. I wanted to say that because Carole and Bandana and Lina had such powerful statements about what the impacts of COVID-19 in their regions, and I think Stacy would agree, it's quite different in Europe, where with rather effective healthcare systems, but of course, many women have been adversely affected. And our region is one which is quite privileged. Certainly Switzerland and Austria are in a sort of group of countries which have a lot more resources. So we have some of the same issues, but also be aware that this Europe is quite diverse. When we have met at regional meetings in Geneva to talk about Beijing Plus 25, most recently last October, and also 5 years ago at the Beijing Plus 20 regional review meeting, what we found in the civil society representatives from Eastern Europe, the former Soviet Union, Russian Federation, have a very different situation than what we experience in Western Europe. And so one of our challenges is how can we connect with those, with the women from the farther eastern reaches of Europe. So that's something that we're hoping, as many people have already said, that we have an opportunity now that we have some time to try to organize better and to try to represent and bring in the experiences and the situations, concerns of those women. As we've all been focused on CSW and generation equality, we're fortunate in Austria that the Austrian government delegation to CSW each year has NGO members, including often many of the members of our committee. So we've been able to be on the inside on some of the negotiations in previous CSWs. As far as what we're doing for Beijing Plus 25 in Vienna is that we've organized a Generation Equality event with the UN Information Service here. Many people don't know that the organization of the Civil Society Forum at the Beijing conference in 1995 happened in Vienna. At that time, Vienna was the head, and there's some of our members on the call here were involved in planning, organizing the Civil Society Forum that happened in Beijing. We are planning to have a meeting. It was supposed to have happened last week, but it's been postponed now to October, where we'll have young feminists we have a younger generation working group in Vienna, and they are going to be interviewing some of the women of the generation who were part of the preparations and the negotiations in Beijing. So we're looking forward to that. We are collaborating in Vienna with other NGO committees. We have the NGO Committee on Sustainable Development. There's an NGO Committee on Peace and an NGO Committee on Aging. And we have just recently, just a week ago, developed a joint statement from the NGO committees in Vienna on COVID-19 recovery, building back better. And we've distributed this, this statement is actually now being sent around by Congo, the Conference of NGOs in Consultative Relationship with the UN, and to get signatures that will be then delivered to the Secretary General and to all the member states. So I hope some of you will have an opportunity to see that and sign it and join us in our advocacy. And we look forward to being together next year at CSW 65 with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Laurie. I know that 10 minutes seems a lot of time, but it's not actually. So I'm aware of time, and we really want to give enough time for the Q&A and the discussion. So I'm moving on to our next speakers, my colleagues from the LAC region, Mabel Bianco and Lina Geudelekian. Mabel from Argentina and Lina from Jamaica. The floor is yours for the next 10 to 12 minutes. If it's okay with you, I will let Mabel, who is going to speak first, know when she's been speaking for 5-6 minutes, so that Lina also has time to address the audience, and we have time for our last speaker, Memory. So Mabel and Lina, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. And thanks that you are going to control my time, because you know I'm speaking a lot. So please, I'm very happy that Cecilia from our group in the NGO CSW LAC could be one of the co-coordinators. And as she's one of our young members, not the only one, we have some others, but we can choose her because she is able to speak more in English, because this is something why we are so few of us here. I'm so sorry. I'm happy to see that we have some friends from the Caribbean, as Dolores, Gia, and also some from Latin America, as Maria Inés and Marcela, but we are very few because the language is one of our barriers. As you know, we were created when it was open this possibility to have the regional NGOs, and with Lina, we have been working for long years, also in Beijing and Cairo, and myself in Nairobi. Sorry to say, I'm a very elderly person, but well, so we were very happy to have this opportunity because, as you know, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are strong feminists and very active and fighting for our rights. So to have this opportunity is a very good one. And we decided to have the committee formed with the big and strong regional networks, because we have strong regional networks on health, on rights, on Afro-descendants, on indigenous. And so this is on economic issues and so on. So this is the principal basis of our strong capacity. We have a lot of members from the region, and we decided to have the two parts, those two sub-regions. So we decided to have in our board members from the English Caribbean, as we say, and members from the Latin America, because we need to be together, but we need to understand that those regions have some differences. So it's good to have the difference inside to discuss and to become only one voice, bringing both sides of the problems. For example, for the spotlight, in Latin America, we think the important issue is femicides, while in the Caribbean, they think is domestic violence. So this is some small difference, but are good to have it there. What are our main activities? Well, since the beginning, we were concentrated on the preparation on the CSW and to advocate in order we have our ideas bring from our governments. So we concentrate to participate in the preparation meetings, because there our ministries of women affairs discuss among themselves, and we need to be there to discuss with them and bring some of our ideas. So we could do that. So since then, since I think 2013, we are the group that we put together the civil society for the preparation, and we bring our report and discuss with the ministries about this. Of course, they make the decision, but at least we have the opportunity to discuss with them and to bring our ideas, and in general, most of them are accepted. In between 70–80% are accepted. There are some others that they didn't. But well, at least we have this. And the strong point is how, with our support, the regional ministries could have a joint voice. Why is this important? Because next in CSW, they are going to be strong, bringing the ideas, and they are not divided, you know, as used to be, that ones are saying something and the others. So because in the CSW, it's very important that they have strong positions and they are all together. This was a very good thing, and we help them, and of course we do our advocacy also in parallel to have the other points they are not agreed to put on. In our activities, the most important were those, but we are participating also in other follow-up of other regional or global discussions, and it was, for example, the Population and Development Conference since Cairo, and we are very active in the regional conference. We passed some years ago the consensus of Montevideo, that is a very strong one, and we pushed to have it there. It is a very complicated in the global, because they put some things that they are not well accepted worldwide, but it's also a very important issue for our region, because for us, sexual and reproductive health and rights are very important, and they have many problems. What happened? Yes.
Sorry, could you take 1 more minute to?
Okay, maybe
move on.
Maybe
two. Yeah, okay, sure.
Thank
and
you.
then we will move on to Lana. Thank you.
Thank you. We are the most unequal region in all terms, but in economics, in politics, in social. So now with the COVID, we are very, very preoccupied, because those inequalities appear and are there, and we need to push our governments to take care of that and help. But this is not easy because we are in a moment that in most of our countries, we are not having progressive governments. So this is something that we are fighting. And finally, I want to say that we are very involved in the gender equality forums. We are in the CSAC. Gia Gaspar, that is here from the Caribbean, and myself, we are representing in the 21 people, and I'm representing the CSAC in the core group. But we are working and we are very interested. It's a pity we couldn't have the forum in Mexico this year, but we hope next year is going to be a strong activity in which we could introduce what we want for the future of Beijing in our region and in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mabel. Lana?
Good morning, everybody from across the world. I'll just follow up on Mabel. My focus will be around COVID-19. And I just want to put on record that I agree with Carole, all the things you say about the pushback from governments and media, etc., etc. I'm speaking from a space of the Caribbean, and we have a group called Caribbean Online Networking Group, consists of 150 groups and individuals which we work and collaborate and advocate and do stuff. For us in the Caribbean, since COVID-19, our life have been changed, been upside down. But as women, and in particular grassroots women, we have been at the front line, working with local authorities, working with other stakeholders like the police, the Social Development Commission, and other persons in ensuring that we use tools that we have been using around safety and using them to look at hotspot and to identify where domestic violence is now taking place more than ever, where the needs are for elderly, the disabled, our young girls and boys, and to ensure that when care packages are put together, the local government and the councillors, where the women are the one from Roots Jamaica. I put in the chat room about Dell working in Trinidad, etc., etc. And our work really is to ensure that we hold our government accountable, that the resources that are being distributed and being asked to be given to the vulnerable and poor communities, that get to the persons who really needed it. And that is what we are doing. And we are working to ensure that when it comes to economic recovery after COVID-19, we are part of that table. The women are now sitting on disaster risk management committee. They are working with Salvation Army. They are working with their community development council. They are working with other government entities. Dell is working through her local parliamentarian and reaching out to groups that are HIV positive, mental ill persons, and that is what she's doing in Trinidad. Jia is working with our rural women and urban women as well. And one of the things that the Jamaica women have been doing is organizing farmers market. So the women who are in farming and is not able to sell their products, and Mildred Crawford also, they have been working in organizing farmers market where the women can earn and sell their produce to various committees, and in conjunction with RADA, which is the Rural Agricultural Development Agency, and ensuring that we as women are out there in the front line doing the things that need to get done, and ensuring that we are part of the process and we are not left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lina, and for the sticking to time. Yeah, Diana is going to introduce our last speaker, and then yeah, we hopefully will have enough time for the discussion. And then if I saw that Houry said talked about the Generational Equality Forum, and maybe Mabel could share more during the Q&A session.
Thank you, Cecilia. Now we are going to pass to Africa. We are going to listen to Memory Kachambwa, who is the co-chair of NGO CSW Africa. Memory, the floor is yours for 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Diana. I'm so excited to be on this platform and just seeing all the amazing activists and also hearing from the other regions. So I'll quickly share in response to the 3 questions. So the first one was on how do we engage in our Africa region. So I'm from FEMNET, which is the African Women Development and Communication Network. We are a Pan-African feminist network with over 800 members across about 48 African countries. So our role as FEMNET is to inform, is to mobilize our different members to influence policy, and we participate in global processes at the UN as well as at the African Union, and also within other global processes related to the SDGs, related to CSW as well. So FEMNET is a co-chair together with Kafui. Kafui is also the co-chair, and she handles the Francophone West Africa region. Kafue is from an organization which is called WILDAF, Women in Law and Development Africa. So we co-chair. We also have what we call the NGO CSW Africa, which has different regional organizations. And I'm happy to see Chantal Kambiwa from Cameroon, who's also on this call. So NGO CSW, we mobilize African women to participate at CSW, and we also coordinate the Africa Regional Caucus. So before each CSW session, we come together usually at the sidelines of the African Union Summit, which usually happens in January. So we come together and we come up with an Africa position. We also do a lot of advocacy mapping in terms of already seeing who is part of the CSW committee, who can we talk to, and also once we get the outcome document and the outcome statement, we circulate it, we distribute it with our different partners at the national level. So we also have our pre-CSW meetings in preparation for CSW. We have webinars. We also do our post-CSW meetings. So every year, the African Union has got what they call the Standing Technical Committee, which is usually held in the last quarter, summer for most of the people. So in these meetings, as NGO CSW Africa, we share with the technical committees of the gender ministers the outcomes of the CSW, and depending on the theme, to see if it can be incorporated into national plans and processes. So this is how we engage as an organization, as we also engage as a collective with our different constituencies across the region. Africa, as you know, it's such a huge region. So we have 5 regions. We have the North, the East, the West, and the Central. We also have a lot of diversity in terms of the Francophone, as well as the Lusophone as well, and also a few Spanish speaking. So the challenge is always around translation, making sure we are inclusive. And we know that, like, for example, CSW is always conducted in English. So it's always a major challenge, particularly for our Francophone sisters, because most of the documentation, especially the statement, which usually the outcome document when it comes when it comes before the actual negotiations, it's usually in English. So we try as much as possible to translate it and to make sure we're as inclusive as possible. Now, let me move just quickly in terms of how we are reacting to the COVID pandemic. So I will speak more in terms of what we are doing as FEMNET. As FEMNET, we are coordinating and supporting African women and girls towards their response towards COVID. We are also influencing public policies and state responses to COVID pandemic. So what we have done is we have come up with an online hub. I'll share the link in the notes, where we are just trying to have a one-stop platform where we can get as much information as well as distribute information, but also we have created different working groups so that we can advocate for a feminist response to the plans and to make sure that the national plans are also addressing issues in terms of looking at the intersections as well. We also are advocating for and trying to influence provisions for sexual reproductive health services and gender-based violence interventions for women and girls and non-binary persons during the different lockdowns that we're seeing across the continent. We are also influencing the formulation and the subsequent implementation of economic response and recovery policies, both at the national as well as the regional and global levels. So we also want to infuse real-time mechanisms to monitor. So we have a tracker which we are trying to collect as much information as possible on what women's rights organizations are doing across the African continent, because we know, even like with the Ebola outbreak, that their contribution, if it's not documented, if it's not tracked, then it won't be counted for. And we know that women are at the forefront of the pandemic. So we are also mobilizing and coordinating the different women's rights organizations, the feminist movements, the women human rights defenders, the gender equality, the social justice activists, to also respond, to make sure that the response to COVID is multidimensional. It's just not only looking at the health elements, but it's looking at the economic, it's looking at the social, and we have launched a digital campaign which we are calling a dignified response, because we have seen, I was just listening to the Asia Pacific region, the increase in authoritarian regimes and how, you know, the response to COVID is really not dignified. So we are really pushing for it to be dignified. And we are also connecting what we are doing with the feminist COVID response. And Houry, she shared the link just this Monday. We launched the website for the COVID feminist response, and I would really urge as many of you to go on to that and to also join that. So on this hub, the platform that we are coordinating on COVID, it has 4 different sections. It's got one section which is looking at your service. So we are trying to collect as many directories of responders. We are trying to see if we can have like a whole map with all the contact details of hotlines so that people can share, but also we can see which countries do not have, for example, some of those hotlines, and also to have a platform where different countries and different women's rights organizations can also replicate what is happening in other countries. We also have a section which we are calling I Am Here, where we are sharing the stories, the realities, some of the hidden, untold stories that we are not hearing, because we see that the narrative, most of the narrative which we really appreciate is mostly on health, on the statistics, but there's certain data which is not being captured. There's certain stories which are not being captured of what is really happening in informal settlements, in migrants, in refugees, in the different circumstances. So this is what we are trying to capture. And and actually document the realities that women are realizing. Then we also have a repository of the different feminist analysis and also on the practical knowledge that is there. So we also have different working groups so that this is very practical. We have different working groups that are doing the communications, the fundraising, and looking at the basic needs. How do we make sure that we influence the basic needs, the humanitarian response as well? And yeah, then we have the tracking team as well as that, the digital campaign. So I'll just share with you, it's quite an exciting platform where we really want to get and have as many as possible African women's rights organizations contributing, but also connecting what is happening on the continent to what is also happening globally. So this is what we are doing. We also have our power dialogues where we are having dialogues with the different African Union mandated institutions, with the the CDC, Center for Disease Control, the Africa UN Economic Commission, the Africa Agenda Directorate, because we really want to foster African women's leadership across the continent in terms of making sure they are aware of what is happening. They are also engaged in the national response plans. We've seen that most of, just recently, the African Union launched a fund for COVID response. And in that fund, they nominated 5 envoys. And out of those envoys, there's only 1 woman. So even in terms of representation, we've seen that most of the plans and the councils that are out there which are responding to COVID, most of them are very gender blind, but also there isn't much representation for women. So we are pushing for that. Yes.
Can I ask you to start concluding, please?
Okay, all right. So let me conclude and just talk in terms of the Generation Equality campaign, that we are also engaging with the different constituencies, and I think we are very active on the digital platform. So once we had the action coalitions, when they were out, we launched a campaign where we're asking our different constituencies, what is your feminist agenda for the action coalitions? And we had a very amazing response to that and a huge reach to that. I also sit on the CSAG together with Mabel, Houry, and also the other people who are on this call. So from Africa, we also have Zone, who is from Cameroon, and she's working with young teenage and adolescent girls on Beijing Plus 25. And they've been having an amazing campaign. They've been having webinars and reaching women through radio and various medias, women in the grassroots and women in all their diversities. So I think I'll end here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mamadi. We had an energizer schedule, but we're going to skip it for the sake of time so that we can have more time for the Q&A. Please start raising your hands if you have questions. We also have some questions from the chat box. I will just do a quick recap to remind you of the similarities we saw today between our regions. We saw several people mention there is a pushback from governments and that states are becoming much more oppressive. There's a crackdown on personal freedoms and freedoms of the press and on social media. There's an increased monitoring of activities and also an increase in violence against women. Commonly, the people who are being left behind are migrant workers, especially some are stuck at borders and they are suffering from security and financial challenges and visa challenges as well. We also have issues with refugees, queer people, and sex workers being the most affected by COVID-19. And we also have discrimination against non-nationals. As an example, there are the Palestinians in Lebanon. We have a lack of inclusion of women in decision-making, and that also includes rural women and people living with HIV. And we also want to ask for more accountability from the government and inclusion of women in decision-making post-COVID-19. It's also forcing us to rethink our mobilization models. And we also saw that we can be united despite our differences. and join our forces so that we go together as regions and have more power at the CSW every year. We will move on to your questions now.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Devin is helping us with this, people raising their hands to speak, and then you will be able to unmute. I just want to also just take 1 minute to read the questions that we collected from the chat box. I'm just gonna share them all, and please, I'm gonna ask our speakers just to comment or respond to the ones that you can answer. Otherwise, we will keep them here, and then we'll see if we can share information after the meeting. And then while we wait for the other people that raise their hands. So we have, and I'm gonna do this very quickly because we also want to give people time to speak. There was a question about looking at the effects of COVID on the situation of women, especially in relation to domestic violence and the loss of their jobs, especially women in the informal sector. That's one question. Another question relates to the how we better support women who have been affected by COVID. This is very general, and we've already tackled, like speakers have already tackled this question as well. Is UN Women coming out with a blueprint indicating the impact of COVID-19 on women and the outcome of the impact of this impact? Again, more questions on domestic violence and how can we make sure that this the organizations have enough money to address these issues. Someone asked about child abuse in this context, if the organizations are targeting child abuse. There's another question on, why someone asked why the word resilience is wrong. So this is someone mentioned this, that this is not a word that they like. Another question on what about women and girls refugees who are facing violence? So this is another question. And also how do FAWCO respond to the tracking campaign, How do we respond to the tracking campaigns that help to identify COVID contact, but also serves as a vehicle for intrusive data gathering? So these are some of the questions. Sorry, we didn't collect them all, but feel free to also raise your hand and ask the questions.
Diana, you're muted.
You're on mute.
Sorry. We have Margaret who has a question. Go ahead, Margaret Owen.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Because I'm really old and I find it very difficult. I'll be very, very quick.
Thank you.
The COVID pandemic has made many, many more women into widows because the pandemic is killing more men than women. And all my wonderful friends, I know many of you all over the world, you know that widows anyway suffer from extreme discrimination and abuse. And the other day, we were talking with people from Russia, from Nigeria, from Pakistan, everywhere. The widows who are left and the widows who were widows anyway are now in extreme poverty because many of them anyway were working as domestic servants in sort of modern day slavery. They've got absolutely nothing. And I am 88 years old, and for the last 25 years, I've gone to every CSW since Beijing. And yet there is this terrible, scandalous silence about widows of all ages, and now many half widows, wives of the missing and forcibly disappeared. And these widows also predominate with their children as refugees and IDPs. I'm thinking of the Rohingya widows camp in Bangladesh. I'm thinking of the thousands and thousands of widows and wives of the missing in Syria and Iraq, and what is happening in Kashmir. And it isn't
Thank you, Margaret.
time anymore. We have to have and listen to the widows' voices. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Raising a very important issue that highlights the inequality that we have and the lack of involvement from our governments. Would any one of our panelists like to answer Margaret's question about widows?
Hi, Diana. Is it okay if I just come in just quickly on widows? I do know that HelpAge, I don't know whether HelpAge International, I don't know, Margaret, if you're aware of them, but we were also discussing with them, and they were also coming up with a paper and strategies in terms of calling for engagement of elderly persons as well, and really pushing that the COVID-19 response should also be cognizant of looking at elderly person as part of one of the essential and vulnerable groups. So I think maybe that's something just to add.
Thank you, Memory. We have a question from Bhavani Akina.
Yeah, I'm more wondering at this point, do we have any separate strategy for COVID? Because this is a really pandemic all over the world, people are suffering. So taking care of them and precautions for it and building immunity and eating healthy food and all this, facing the COVID so that we don't affect more related to COVID. Is there any strategy for it? Because we are working on COVID in India, so but all over the world from UN. Just want to check on that.
I'm sorry, which population were you talking about? Because I couldn't hear you.
Is there any strategy for facing the COVID?
Facing the COVID, okay.
Yeah, precautions for the COVID and building immunity for the COVID and how to take care of it, health, so that we don't get more effect related to COVID, because the whole world is opening now. People are moving around and flights are started. So
okay, so
we
what's
need
the
to really
prevention strategy from COVID or other future pandemics? Would anyone like to answer?
I can say that sorry, it's my bad. Can I?
Yes, of course, thank you.
Thank you. I must say that worldwide, but in our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are pushing to strengthen our public health services, because one of the problems is that we have had the privatization of healthcare services, and this was a problem why we are not able now to have a good response. So we are claiming as women to avoid this and come back, and we are advising this since the last 4 years in all our CSW papers telling about that. So this we are stressing now, and in some countries are going better, but not all in others. Still very few money for public health services.
Yeah, we are working on greatly impacting this COVID in India. So mostly how to face the immunity, how to build the immunity, how to change our lifestyle and how to eat healthy living. So this is the way we can at least eliminate, avoid, and even though if we get COVID, we could face the COVID. So this is what I'm working currently. So I think this is the immediate thing UN needs to address it, or, we can all share the information. I can share what we have been doing. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you for sharing. Perhaps our colleagues from Vienna and Geneva can share your thoughts with the UN body. We have a question from Bibi Shah.
Hello, I am from Nepal. Here in Nepal, just increasing the cases and also coming from out of countries, our people who are in the employment. So now they are staying in quarantine. So we have not any more guideline about the quarantine, about the psychosocial support. So if you have any guidelines, so can you share with us, please? So I need to the support for that. And also another thing is the public health is very poor in here. So our government trying to manage, but not sufficient service here. So we are trying to ourselves as a psychosocial experts. So we need proper guideline. How somehow we are managing, but if there is the global, if any psychosocial support guideline, it would be better. Thank you.
Thank you, Bibi. Do we have an answer from our panel?
Can I speak?
Please do.
Yeah? Okay. I just wanted to say that, of course, this is a pandemic that we were all unprepared for. So there are no specific strategies that fit one situation. What's it as a regional network, as a national network, as a global network. However, I want you to say,
Bandana?
Yes, this is
Sorry,
Bandana.
you're breaking up.
Oh, then because I put my video off also because my network is bad. So perhaps I'm not
we can
able
hear
to.
you better now. Maybe
you
we
can hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. What I was saying is that this is a pandemic that we were not prepared for. So as a network, what is it that we can do collectively? So I think it is, there's no specific strategy that fits all. So you will have to evolve strategies as a national network, as a regional network, as a local. Hear me? No. Sorry, I will write down. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe you can share that in the chat box, Bandana. That would be better.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Apologies for the network connection. So I don't know if any one of the speakers want to address Bebe's question or has something to share. Otherwise, we will read Bandana's response on the chat box. And then we have another participation from Elizabeth Carr.
Yes, can you?
Go ahead, Elizabeth, you're on mute. You have to unmute yourself, Elizabeth.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Very good, thank you. I'm the UN representative for the International Council of Women and based in New York. And my question is, in listening to all of this wonderful information, because there's such a treasure of information, and I just tuned in a little late, so hopefully I'm not asking something that's already been answered. But will NGO CSW, and maybe this question could go to Houry, going to put all of this information together to really have a global mapping of the various issues relating to women and COVID, and any other things that obviously we feel are relevant? I think it would make a wonderful report. I hope I'm not repeating something that has already been done. That is my question.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
I guess I better jump in because I heard my name. And actually, thank you, Bandana. She is writing down her response too. And we have 6 minutes left. And, while we follow the chats, I just want to say thank you to everyone. And yes, Elizabeth, this will be an amazing mapping opportunity. And that's why we're so excited that all of our NGO CSW in the regions, our activist sisters have come on board to share all the rich work that they're doing, the recording, the chat box, the links that everyone shared with each other. Everything will be shared with over the 500 participants who signed up. So in a lot of ways, taking our in-person meetings online has helped us all so much. So thanks for being here.
Not so much for sharing with us, but publishing it for globally for everybody else.
Yeah, we will put it on our website. And also don't forget, there was a link about COVID-19 response from feminists who's doing amazing work. So a lot of this collaboration, the purpose of all of these conversations are to not duplicate work, right? So NGO CSW does not want to start another platform or a mapping facility for COVID-19 response when there's already amazing feminist sisters who are doing the work. So we're adding their voices, we're adding our voices to their work and bringing their work to ours. We shared that link and we'll share it again. Oh, there's Devin, of course. I'm not surprised, sharing the COVID-19 response from feminists, and that's really important. So I recommend that link for more information. But for this specific meeting, I think the idea that our regions are coming together and sharing best practices and issues and even the understanding of why there's New York, Geneva, Vienna, and then there's the huge African region, the huge Asia Pacific region who's being led by two co-chairs and their work that's important. And also bringing in the generation equality forum activists and why we're so lucky that we have some members on the NGO CSW side that's working on generation equality. We have some members who are working specifically on COVID. We are so lucky to have someone like Bandana who leads on CEDAW and does amazing work locally as well. So yeah, this is an amazing opportunity to recognize the rich work that women and girls are leading, and widows. Margaret, we will never forget widows, and I will shout out, Zarin said, widows can also be young girls. I mean, when you start talking about all of these different aspects, there's so many to address migration, but we will take it on and we'll lead the best we can. I'll stop talking. There's one more hand raised. I just want to say that we do want to end at exactly 10 a.m. and I want all the mics open 30 seconds before we end so we can hear everybody's voices. So let's give the floor to one more person and let the moderators finish the meeting. Thank you for this opportunity.
We have Pauline. Sorry. We have Pauline. Go ahead, please, very briefly.
Thank you very much. I'm Pauline Kariuki from Kenya. Mine is a contribution. At this point of this crisis, we are really relying on the farmers. And most of the farmers are women, smallholder producers. In the post-COVID strategy, I would request that we include how these women are going to bounce back and address their issues, because they have also been impacted very heavily by COVID, and they need to get back to their feet. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Memory, you mentioned that the women are going to farmers markets. Would you like to answer this question? Memory? Or if anybody, okay.
Yes, Diana, thanks. I think maybe just in response to Pauline, one of the things that, one of the experiences that has been shared with some of the members is that the need for actually supporting domestic value chains in terms of making sure that even the producers are supported as much as possible. So we've seen in some countries that they are supporting smallholder farmers to be able to support the local markets. So maybe it's just an example, but I totally agree with you, Pauline, that the agricultural sector is a sector where we know most of the women are involved, and it's one of the sectors that has been so much impacted. And I think what is important is to make sure that the stimulus packages that are being proposed actually target smallholder farmers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Memory.
Thank you, everyone, for attending today. We have run out of time. I would like to thank Houry, Ivy, and Devin for working on this organization, and my co-moderator, Cecilia, and thank you all for attending. I will leave the floor to Cecilia before we have our 30 seconds of open mics.
It's 10 already. So I'll just let this meeting, we will wrap up to do what Houry just was saying. So we can open our mics and then just say goodbye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Gladys.
Take care of yourselves.
Bye-bye.
Bye from Gladys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.